a presentation. I'll open it up just now.
Okay. You don't have to have the video on, by the way. It's just me being stuck on the screen.
Oh, okay. All right. No, that's fine.
Yeah. I just need to know which button I need to press so that we can in old age and computers. So never mind that. Okay.
Even though it's back with the laptop.
Yeah, no, I still work without a laptop. Welcome everyone to the second session of the Building Inspectors Network. I hope my network is smooth. Just let me know if it's not up to standard. It should be all right. It should be able to hold up. You are welcome to the Building Inspectors Network. At least today you can see my face. I'm still struggling like last week, which buttons I need to press. I'm now blaming it on old age. And I just need to check with the people in the background. Ali, is my voice clear and everything else?
Yes, you're 100% sure.
All right, then I can go ahead. As I said, I'll just blame everything else on old age, not knowing which button to press. At least today we're gonna start on time. As I've indicated, this is a series of 12 sessions, and they are designed to be training sessions. They're not long. They are designed to be about an hour. So we'll have a presenter every week. I'll moderate. The first one, I was a presenter and the moderator at the same time. Going forward, I'm only going to be the moderator. There will be a presenter on each topic. As I've indicated previously, for those that have attended, these every week there's a different topic. Today we're talking about sustainable building practices. I'll introduce the speaker for today, who's going to take us through the second topic. There will be future topics. I know there's a topic on roofs, roof design, roof structures. Then there's a topic on fire safety, and issues that are relating to buildings and fire issues. And there's another topic on foundations that will come in the future, and foundation structures. And then there'll be, and these are not in, I'm not giving them to in chronological order. And then there'll be ones where we're talking about glazing, doors, windows, and all of that. All of these are different aspects of a building structure, and then and so forth. But there are 12 in a series that will deal with building structures and the construction environment. The second thing that I need before I introduce our speaker for today is that there were some questions that were received from the session last week. I will deal with those. There were three main questions that were received. And those questions relate to, the first one relates to building orientation, and the second one relates to non-electric energy tools that could be available. And finally, one, it relates to solar panels and solar systems, whether with battery backup, without battery backups. So I will start in with the one on building orientation in the Northern Hemisphere. Somebody asked, because in the presentation last week, I spent a bit of time with regard to building orientation, but specifically as it relates to the Southern Hemisphere, that if you're in the Southern Hemisphere, the best building orientation would be to the north, because the sun travels on the northern side. So to get maximum or to maximize your building efficiency, particularly as it relates to energy, you would want your building to be north facing. Or the majority of the building must be north facing, including your glazing, your ventilation, and majority of the energy related stuff must be on the northern side of the building. And any building that is south facing, you're generally going to get a very cold building, which not only doesn't maximize the energy, but it doesn't get access to sun. It doesn't get access to any natural ventilation and natural benefits, or the benefits of nature. So as I respond to the first question, is then the opposite will be true for those that are in the northern hemisphere. That means that to capture consistent sun and ideal for living areas, and also the most beneficial for the building with regard to cooling, lighting, offices, and all of that, it's ideal to receive the most morning sun from the east and the afternoon sun from the west. If you're in the northern hemisphere, the most ideal orientation will be south exposure. So it's the opposite of the southern hemisphere. So if you're in the southern hemisphere, you need the northern exposure. If you're in the northern hemisphere, you need the southern exposure. That means you need a southern orientation. So that answers that question. The second question, as I said, has to deal with non-electric energy tools that are available. I think this is a simple question, and then the presenter we have today, in fact, is at liberty at a later stage when he has time to deal with this, because he spent a couple of years in this environment building windmills and all of this stuff. There are, even today, I happen to have a fortune of being introduced to a vehicle. It's called a self-charging vehicle or something like that, where the vehicle has got a generator and a battery system on board that it can self-charge. That means if you run out of energy while you're driving, you don't have to be worried about plug in. The vehicle will generate its own electricity to recharge the battery. So even in the built environment, you do have a variety of systems. And that variety of systems, you've got systems where because technology has developed, you've got systems where you've got battery backup. That means whatever the system that you have, you are able to store energy, and then you don't have to tap into the grid all the time. So if you are tied to the grid, it's called a grid-tied system. That means when the energy that you're self-providing runs out, you then tap into the system. When you're not grid tied, it's when the energy runs out, it means you will rely on a battery backup of some sort, and the battery technology has been developing as fast as possible. The last question is on the solar systems. It's nearly the same as this question, to say, what are the different types of solar systems that you have available? This is an easy question in a sense that when investing in a solar system, you need to look at primarily four things. The first one is each panel has a size. And when I talk about the size, I'm not talking about the dimensions. We're talking about the wattage in terms of the sun capture or the energy capture. And that wattage, the second thing is the output in terms of how much does that particular solar panel gives you. So the dimensions of a solar panel has very little to do with the wattage that it can capture. So each solar panel, when you buy a solar system, the two things that you must look at is, it's not the number of solar panels that you have. You can have 20 solar panels, but you find that the energy capture or the sun capture is very little, and the output is also very little. So you need to look at how much of the energy that this panel captures and how much does it give out. That means how much do you get out of it? Then that will determine the number of panels you have. So for example, if you need 250 watts, and then you want to determine the number of panels. If you've got panels that gives 150, that means you need only 2. If you've panels that gives you 100, it means you need 3 panels, irrespective of the dimensions and the size of the panels. So that's a very important thing to do. The last point that you need to check is it's the system that is attached to those panels, because not all panels has to be attached to a system, because you can use the panels directly. You can use the panels with the battery system. You can use the panels with that is the converter portion or the conversion portion, because the electricity that you have to capture has to be converted. So you need to make sure that the conversion tools that you purchase, first, they must be compatible. Secondly, they must be relevant to what you want to achieve. So I needed to spend that first 10 minutes just responding to that. And that's what we'll do in every session that we're going to have. We're going to spend the first few minutes responding to any questions that would have arrived so that we don't leave them behind. In the future, as we go along, there is a website that is available for the building inspectors network, and that particular website, all the presentations that we would have done and all the training will be published there, including the questions and answer. Not to waste time, let me introduce what I would easily call a friend and a former mentee. We met many long years ago, and this particular chap, I have ample respect. One of the few people in the construction industry that I have ample respect, that he has grown into the industry, and I don't think there's any expertise that he knows beyond organizing gatherings besides construction. So we've got Mr. Ronnie Siphika. I'm hoping in the next few years I'll be calling him Dr. Ronnie Siphika. He's the CEO of the Construction Management Foundation. It's an MPC. And then when we have time, we will talk a little bit about it at the end, because you should make contribution to this organization. And his background is construction project management. He has worked in the construction industry from the times when he was still at Varsity, University of the Witwatersrand, and up until and is a postgraduate master's qualified from the construction CEM, as they call it, Construction Economic Management of the University of Witwatersrand in the Faculty of Engineering and the Built Environment. And full-time, he's the CEO of the Construction Management. And Ronnie, of late, he has been running around. The last time I spoke to him, he was busy building windmills in the Western Cape. And I'm not talking about farm windmills. I mean the technology energy windmills. And he's now in Johannesburg. He's busy with solar farms and all of these things. But he is a construction person. He's one person, as I said, that knows more about the construction industry than anybody else. And this is the chap to know. Ronnie, you can take it from here. Thank you very much. The time was yours up until you get to the end, and we'll do a Q&A. Thank you very much. I'll mute.
All right, no, thank you very much, Mr. Mashilo. Can you colleagues hear me?
Yeah, we can hear you well.
All right, no, great stuff. Thank you very much for that introduction, Mr. Mashilo. Colleagues, thank you for joining this session. As Mr. Mashilo did mention that my name is Ronnie Siphika. I'm currently running an organization called the Construction Management Foundation. This organization obviously was started a couple of years back. It's something that I do in concurrent with my full-time employment. As he did mention, that I've been in the renewable energy industry for the past couple of years. In terms of background, I obviously started my my varsity studies at Wits. I did my undergraduate there, and then went on to do my MSc in industrial engineering. Colleagues, it's not really about me. It's actually about what we are looking at here in the screen, which is sustainable building practices, and also various types of energy standards or trends that are currently shaping the South African commercial and residential property market. So for me, colleagues here, I think the most important thing is that it's very important to frame my discussion to say that this discussion, colleagues, will primarily be about just touching on a couple of things that are shaping, sustainable practices or sustainability within the construction industry, particularly within the real estate market. Obviously, we will touch on some other trends that are also are shaping the whole sustainability agenda within the broader South African economy, and also specifically within the construction sector. So, colleagues, in as far as the agenda of what that we have today and what I will cover is that it's just about 7 areas that we'll be looking at. The first one, obviously, is the importance of green building, because what we are talking about here, we're talking about sustainability, but sustainability in the construction sector, the biggest drive of sustainability is the realization that we need to start building greener buildings that emit less emissions. And the biggest driver around that is that the practice of green building is what is driving this particular trend within the construction sector. And obviously the broader themes we'll touch on as we move on. The second area that we'll look at it's the specific regulations or the regulatory landscape that does that affect this environment or that shapes this environment. So we'll be looking at the various standards that, more importantly, obviously, SENS 1000 and also the Green Star accreditation, which is currently led by the Green Building Council of South Africa. We'll touch on issues around energy efficiency, the importance of energy efficiency, particularly in practice, the various instruments that are used to ensure that the kinds of buildings that we are in are energy efficient. And then I think Mr. Mashilo did cover this a bit. The issue of solar, particularly rooftop solar PV, and also battery storage, and just a few things around what's currently happening right now in the market. There's quite a big change happening right now in the South African energy market, in as far as the codes, in as far as the commercial arrangements of sourcing power and also developing power with new things like energy wheeling frameworks and also SAWEN. Which I will also touch on later on. The other thing, obviously, that shapes buildings, sustainability within buildings is the use. It's water and waste management. It's very, very important to also be able to touch on that, so that we don't make buildings, or green does not necessarily mean it's always about energy. There are also various other aspects that do touch on this particular area. There's also the issue of construction materials that are inherently used in buildings to ensure that those buildings are in fact sustainable. Then we'll look at specifically green ratings. This is one of the biggest drivers of most practices around green buildings in South Africa. So that then means that you have to understand what the role of the Green Building Council, you need to understand EDGE, you also need to understand BREEAM. But for me, obviously, today is to ensure that building inspectors have an understanding of how these kinds of tools would primarily maybe, affect your job, and what other areas as a building inspector you have to look at. And then we'll then touch on a few market trends and also opportunities, some of the things around demand drivers, the issue of financing for such buildings, and also specifically maybe for you guys as professionals within the space. We'll also look at various career pathways that you might need to explore. So colleagues, that's what we will be covering today. In section 1, I did mention that obviously the most important thing, colleagues, here is that we need to be always aware that the biggest thing that's shaping sustainable construction practices, or the methods that we use, or the kinds of enhancements we end up using in buildings, is that it's shaped primarily by the practice of green building. So colleagues, obviously green building is not just a green building because we want it to be a green building. There is a rationale behind it, and that's primarily because of climate change. I think most of you are aware that depending on how old are you, the climatic conditions we have these days are a bit more erratic, they're a bit more different compared to the climatic conditions that we used to have. There's more harsher rains, it gets very hot, and some areas becomes dry. So there's a lot of issues in as far as the climate is concerned. So the construction sector's response to climate change is to say that because building plays such a fundamental role within the built environment, is that we as the construction sector need to be able to start doing things a bit differently and respond to those commitments, particularly that are made by the government, in as far as trying to ensure that we play a critical role in the country's response to climate change. South Africa, also another important thing is that we can't really move away from the fact that we've been affected by load shedding for a couple of years. So the energy crisis also informs that. So colleagues, in as far as the drivers or the context, one of the most important things is that we need to be aware that South Africa is actually one of the biggest emitters of carbon dioxide in the world. That's primarily because of the nature of our power system and how we actually produce power. South Africa, we are largely a coal. We primarily use over 80% of our supply of power in the country is largely due to coal-fired power stations that are largely run by Eskom. Eskom is about 15, 16 power stations that are coal based, and obviously now with various developments within renewable energy, we are seeing that there's also a bit of some integration of various renewable energy technologies, and those are actually growing quite rapidly, and they will be integrated into the system as we move along. So it's very, very important that, colleagues, you remember that South Africa is actually one of the biggest emitters globally in terms of CO2. Then in as far as the construction sector, where we come in on average globally, the emissions that are typically come from emissions typically come from different sources, and buildings and the construction sector is about 40% of total emissions in any country at any point in time. But in South Africa, the estimate at the moment is that 40% of emissions come primarily from buildings. This could be from the type of construction material we use, from the type of energy systems we use in order to power up those buildings. Remember, we need to make sure that the buildings are warm. We need to make sure there's lighting. We need to make sure that the materials we use are there, so that we can ultimately have that kind of built environment. Then the other thing is that's shaping obviously the adoption of various I'd say technologies that are included in buildings, is because energy in South Africa is becoming a bit more expensive. So a lot of building owners are starting to realize that paying Eskom such a huge amount for electricity is starting to become a bit of a commercial risk for them. So as you can see, over the years, Eskom has been increasing their tariffs, and that's not sustainable in as far as any owner that would be owning a property asset. So reducing power consumption is also one of the drivers around this. So load shedding has been one of the biggest things, colleagues, as you might know. And since I think 2020, I'd say maybe since 2006, when Thabo Mbeki was still the president at the time, there was a realization that we are actually not going to have enough power to try and ensure that we meet all the needs of the South African economy. So hence there was a whole discussion around, you know what, let's try and build more power stations. And then that's where Medupi and Kusile came in. Obviously those became a bit of a disaster, because they took about 17 years to construct, and obviously there's quite a lot of project related issues that came with those. The other important things that, colleagues, that you might need to have a look at is actually the fact that we do have a Climate Change Act. It's Act 22 of 2024. And this act, colleagues, introduced binding sectoral emission targets. That means that the built environment is included. So in a sense, that act was really just coming in to say, this is our commitment as the government, not only in construction or the built environment. This is for transport. This is for various other sectors that obviously emit quite a lot of CO2 into the air. So that act is quite important as a driver for this whole sustainability agenda in the South African construction sector. So the other important thing is that obviously if green buildings tend to save quite a lot of energy compared to just normal buildings. So if a building is defined as green, I'll go to that later on when we speak about the ratings that the GBCSA administers. But one of the most important things that you need to be aware of is that when a building is green, you are more likely to save a lot on energy. You are more likely to save a lot on water. You are more likely to make use of wastewater, and also just waste that is generated as a result of that building functioning. So we'll touch on that, but it's very important that you just remember that green buildings do save a lot of energy. So those are just the key drivers in the context in as far as this is concerned, colleagues. So then on section 2, colleagues, we're looking at the landscape, the regulatory landscape around this whole green building agenda in the construction sector, and also what informs sustainable practices in the construction and the construction sector and the built environment. So, colleagues, it's very important that you, as building inspectors, you understand you cannot be a building inspector and not be able to understand SENS 10400. Specifically, you can actually look at the whole SENS 400 standard just so that you have an understanding of what it looks like. That standard is primarily informs how any building is constructed. So this is from everything from foundations to the walls to roofing. Every single aspect that makes up a building is governed by SENS 10400. So it's quite important that colleagues that you are aware of that standard. But the energy usage in building, which is XA, it came up with something very unique that is actually currently being implemented right now in the market. The most important part around that, colleagues, is that there was a realization that before you try and improve a building, you need to first measure how much that building performs from an energy point of view. So there was an introduction of something called energy performance certificates. So there are certain types of buildings whereby there is an expectation that before you try and improve on that building, you need to first measure how much performance that building has. So as you can see, when you look at your fridge sometimes has some rating that you would see there on the fridge that would show that this fridge performs at this level. So buildings are also expected, to be measured to say, okay, this building consumes this amount of energy per meter squared. So that's something that I will highlight as we move along. But it's very important that you understand that we have gotten to a point whereby we are now trying to benchmark various buildings so that we have an understanding how much this building consumes. You cannot change something that you can't measure. So it's quite important that you understand that at the moment there is a mandate from the government to ensure that all buildings are actually measured so that we know how much those buildings actually perform from an energy point of view. So this includes things like lighting, heating, anything else that just consumes power within a building. And also, this is not only residential buildings, this is also commercial buildings, warehouses, and various industrial facilities that are out there. It also includes schools, hospitals, and everything within that real estate market. So it's very important that colleagues, you understand the SENS 10400 as one of the benchmarks or one of the defining aspects of how buildings are said to be improved. Then you then look at SENS 10400. There's also issues that you also need to be able to understand in as far as water consumption is concerned. It doesn't really help to only focus on energy. Sustainability is not only about water. Sustainability is also trying to ensure that we improve our water resource management that is consumed by buildings. So there's a couple of things, obviously, that you might already be aware of, is that, when you have rainwater harvesting systems, at least you don't have to use as much water. South Africa has a water problem at the moment. I think in Gauteng, there was a recent shortage of water in various areas. It could be for different types of reasons in different areas. But obviously, the reality is that we are not supplying enough water that users currently need, or the government is not supplying enough water. So one of the things that's very important that you need to understand is that buildings need to be able to optimize on the usage of water, and also have mechanisms that ensure that water can still be reused, or that water can the leakages or whatever the case may be are minimized. Then without touching on too much on this one, I'll move on to the next. So the most important thing here, colleagues, as I did mention, is that how we then define a building or sustainability in buildings is primarily through schemes that are called green rating systems. So these green rating systems are frameworks that then inform what we focus on when we're trying to measure the sustainability or the greenness of a particular building. So the one that's very popular in South Africa is obviously the Green Star rating. It's administered by the Green Building Council of South Africa. It looks at various things like how the overall property management is done within that building. You get particular particular points. If, say, for example, the way you manage maybe the property management strategy that is employed within that building is sustainable, you then get particular points you get specific points for that. The energy system that you have integrated into the building, if you are using solar instead of power from the grid, there are certain points that you get. If you are using maybe if you're using diesel only, there are some points that you might not be able to get, primarily because it's not a sustainable source of energy. Then also transport. So buildings sometimes are intentionally built to try and avoid certain modes of transport that emit into the air. As you can see that there's also a huge drive around the use of public transit systems. So buildings that typically do have things like buses, instead of having a parking that would be maybe parkings that would have like 20, 30 cars at once. If you use maybe, if there's a bus, there's some points that you are going to get, because obviously to get to work, you are consuming, there is the transport that you are using to get to work does emit some form of CO2 into the air. Then water systems, the water systems that you've built within the building, having rainwater harvesting systems is very, very important. Also storage of that water, so that generally users of the building don't run out of the building. Practices around land use, issues around materials that are chosen to build a particular building, which is very important, contributes quite a lot of points around that. And obviously, this is not only just for commercial and retail and education. This is also in residential complexes, all the different types of real estate assets that are currently there. In other countries, obviously, there are specific types of green rating systems that are used. For example, the International Finance Corporation and primarily the World Bank. Every time when you maybe seek funding from them and you are saying that you want to go and build a new development or a new mall, before you even get that financing, they are going to tell you that, listen, if you're going to use this money, we expect that you do something about energy, we expect you to do something about water, and we are going to measure that. And how they measure the greenness, they use something called EDGE, which is a green rating system as well. In the UK, they use something called BREEAM. BREEAM, there's different similarities around BREEAM, EDGE, and the Green Star rating. So all of them are trying to work towards something. So in a sense, this is a checklist of things that you just need to tick so that we can be able to measure that out of all the 10 things that we've said that you must do, how many of them have you done? So usually these systems are obviously very transparent, but obviously the people that do these green rating systems are people that are primarily registered as green building consultants and so forth. So there is a particular skill set that you need to do. I'll touch on that when we go to career pathways at the end. Then, in as far as energy efficiency is concerned, colleagues, there's just primarily a few things as building inspectors you need to be aware of. One of the most important architectural sort of a theme that has emerged over the years is that sometimes it's very important that that you take consideration of the type of design that a building has, instead of coming up with an active kind of design or architectural design philosophy. There's also something called passive design, where you inherently design the building to be able to be high performance, primarily because of maybe the type of material that you are going to spec, the type of roofing you are going to spec, the type of even the orientation of the building itself falls under the issues of passive design. So in as far as passive design principles, as I did mention, is that it's very important that when an architect starts a building, they need to be able to try and design out or design the climate out so that maybe a building can reduce energy demand by design. So instead of trying to put in, let's say, for example, instead of using normal corrugated roofing, you use thatch. Thatch is a bit cooler, so that then means that your building, when it's hot, that building becomes a bit cooler, so that you don't have to use a lot of power to try and reduce the amount of heat that's within that building. The orientation of the building is also very important. So where the building is facing and how the sun goes around that particular building is very important. Those things fall under it's one of the obviously the passive design principles that would be used to design the climate out. Then the other one is the issue of insulation. Obviously, if you don't have good insulation in a building, it's either it becomes too cold or it becomes too hot. So important that when a building is designed, there is consideration that's taken around reducing, the filtration, the infiltration of whatever that's external and also what's inside and whatever that's done and so forth. That's also contributes to things like noise as well. So passive design touches a lot on issues around insulation and ventilation. Ventilation is also another important one. There are buildings that when you just immediately get in, it feels very stuffy. The windows are small or the windows are too big, and there's not enough ventilation that's coming in. So obviously, architects these days try and design buildings in such a way that natural ventilation is incorporated into the main design of the building, so that you eliminate the need to have other forms of ventilation systems that you'll have to maybe configure and design into the buildings. Then glazing and fenestration, also very, very important. The type of glass that you use or the windows that you use, that's gonna also inform. There are certain buildings that need a lot of lights because it's too dark, or that's primarily because they've used the wrong size of windows, or they've used a different glazing system that doesn't promote natural light within the building. So, and also remember, I did mention the issue around orientation. So how we orientate a building is also very important in as far as passive design is concerned. So it's very, very important that you remember this whole principle around passive design before you even come up with various mechanisms to try and improve the performance of a building. Then going to the specific ones around energy efficiency, colleagues, is the three most important one. That's lighting, ventilation, and also the use of hot water systems to try, obviously, you obviously need to try and think about that when you are inspecting a building, or when you are designing a building. So the first important one here, colleagues, is that you need to be always aware that at any point in time, to try and improve the efficiency or the energy efficiency of a building, the one most important thing is that you have to ensure that the lighting that you are going to design within the building is well thought out. So you cannot just decide at any point in time that, for me, I'm just going to use these lights because these lights, I think I like them. I think they are too bright, or they are, however, maybe the way that they are designed from their manufacturer. So there's a whole kind of approach that has come, whereby obviously there is now a whole lot of demand for LED lights, whereby most building owners would say, you know what, instead of all these old buildings that are consuming a lot of power, I'm going to replace them with LED lights. So LED lights obviously save quite a lot of energy because of their inherent design. And then obviously, you also want to make sure that the orientation of the building is in such a way that during the day, there isn't any need for you to keep on turning on the lights, even if there's no need. So that's why you see a lot of buildings. And if you look at Sandton, most buildings have a lot of glazing, and that glazing is there to ensure that when people are working there isn't any light that's used during the day, because the natural light just comes in, and then that means that there's no need for us to be using lighting in order to ensure that we can see what we're doing within that. So for you as a building inspector, it's very important that you always think about lighting power density. So you need to make sure that at the very least, the buildings that you are inspecting, lighting is taken into consideration, that we don't use lights that actually consume quite a lot of energy. Then HVAC and mechanical ventilation. The most important aspect here is that HVAC systems tend to use quite a lot of consume a lot of energy. So your air conditioning, the ventilation system that you use to try and improve the indoor air quality, those things are quite important in as far as the consumption of power in a building. Then obviously we know that hot water is also very, very, it's one of the biggest consumers of power within a building. Your geysers, those things consume quite a lot of power. There's also obviously a lot of improvements around the design of geysers now. Most geysers come with some insulation to make sure that, when you have insulated a building, when you've insulated, a geyser, instead of instead of maybe saying that geyser, maybe after you switch it off, it becomes hot for 1 hour, then you have to reheat it. An insulated one would take longer, to get cold, primarily because of that insulation that is used within that building. So the primary and most important things that you have to look at are these three when you're inspecting whether a building is energy efficient or not. So you need to look at those things and try and ensure that they are incorporated into your inspection checkpoints. Then the biggest trend at the moment, colleagues, is obviously rooftop solar. Sometimes not rooftop solar, sometimes it's ground-mounted solar. This is an area of work I'm actually dealing with at the moment. Obviously, there's different types. Some of these solar systems are installed on carports, some of them on the roof, some of them on the ground. So it just depends on how you want it. And also, solar is not the only system that you can use. There are some larger commercial and industrial users that sometimes prefer the use of maybe a smaller scale wind turbines that also would come with battery. There would also be some that would maybe prefer, especially farms, biogas, whereby you use biogas or biodegradables from a farm to try and produce power so that you can store it and then use it when you need it. So this is an area that's very, very important that building inspectors and professionals need to sort of be aware of as a trend in the market. So at the moment, obviously, there's a huge uptake of rooftop solar and also battery systems. Colleagues, for me at this point, I can't see how you would have solar without battery, or also any other form of power without having some form of battery, because you don't want a situation whereby if you have, let's say, for example, it's too hot today and your solar system is performing quite well and you're extracting a lot of energy. That energy, if you don't use it, for example, if you don't have battery, you can't store it anyway. So it goes to waste. So it's quite important that, colleagues, when you think about this, you need to also be always aware that battery is actually what actually makes all these renewable energy systems work, because without battery you can't store, and if you can't store, you keep on wasting power. And also, obviously, there are new instruments right now whereby, if, say, for example, you have enough power within for your own needs as a building user, if you are not using that power, you can also decide to sell that power back into the grid. So it's quite important that you think around that. So for rooftop solar, colleagues, most buildings at the moment, everyone wants rooftop solar. There are different instruments in terms of how people do it. Some people just do an outright purchase. They will just maybe have 1 million sitting there. They go buy maybe a system that would enable them to have at least maybe 500 kilowatt, maybe a 500 kilowatt system or 50 kilowatt system, depending on how much obviously their power needs are. So it's very important that you always are aware of that. Obviously, for historically, this is an area that was not highly regulated by ESCOM. Everyone can just, at the time, well, historically, everyone could just build their own solar, their own solar, and then use it. And then after using it, no one would know whether they are using it or not. So there is something that has been mandated by the South African government, which is called small scale embedded generation. So it's called SSCG. SSCG means that if you have say, for example, if a system is above 1 megawatt, there is a requirement that you need to ensure that it is registered by the municipality. Your system as a whole, you need to make sure that you just fill up an application form and ensure that you register that system with the municipality, particularly if it's not off grid. If it's not off grid, say, for example, you are just using it to complement your current or maybe reduce your current consumption, you need to register that so that maybe City of Johannesburg or City of Cape Town or City of Tshwane is always aware that there is a system that's operating there. And obviously they can then come up with various there are some technical aspects around it that just make sure that the grid is protected. Then the other thing is also sizing. You also need to be aware that not every building will always, not every residential, commercial, and industrial buildings are sized differently, and that's also based, obviously, that's largely based on their consumption. So it's very, very important that you understand how system sizes are. You need to know what's the difference between a 10 kilowatt system, a 50 kilowatt system, and a 500 kilowatt system, and also 1 megawatt, or maybe if you're talking about maybe utility scale, about 100 megawatts, megawatt type of systems that are used. So obviously, I won't go too into the details around this primarily because it is an engineering area. But from an inspection point of view, as a building inspector, it's very important that you at least have a basic understanding that these systems are there to try and reduce the amount of power that is consumed in that particular real estate asset. Then moving on to section 5, colleagues, as I did say that the other important part outside of energy within that is shaping how buildings are designed is water and wastewater management. So these are things like rainwater harvesting, grey water reuse, principles around circular economy, and also how you manage construction waste or the waste that is generated within a building. So water efficiency, colleagues, as I did say that there are different systems that are being installed in buildings to try and reduce the amount of water. So the one and most important thing that you must always remember about water efficiency is that South Africa is a water scarce country, and obviously making use of water in a very efficient way is a non-negotiable. So it's very very important that you still remember things like in Cape Town there was something called Day Zero. That Day Zero was just maybe obviously overhyped for that specific purpose, primarily because they were trying to create an accelerated awareness that at some point we might actually run out of water if we don't try to use water efficiently and also design buildings in a way that makes sure that water is used efficiently. So like for example in certain types of buildings you would see that a toilet maybe from 1990 or maybe a toilet from 2000 and a toilet from these days, you can see there's a difference there. The toilets that we used to use back then, they would use quite a lot of water. Maybe you just did a small nyana something there, and after doing that small nyana something, then there's no need for you to use all of the water that was inside that bucket within the toilet. Sometimes the toilets from these days, you just press a bit, then it just removes whatever that you left there. And then and there's also some building owners obviously sometimes prefer to make sure that they build systems that reuse that water instead of taking that water back to Joburg water or Rand water or whatever the case may be for processing. There are systems that are being built at the moment that make use of or reuse that water. And obviously with these Green Star ratings that I was talking about earlier, these things are awarded points, and they obviously help a lot in terms of reducing the demand for water that's used in buildings. So obviously this is not the only thing, they're just the most important things around water use in building. Then construction waste, colleagues, this is very, very important. So reducing waste and also imported carbon, and also making sure that the same materials that maybe you might be using in the construction of a building can be used for something else instead of sending them to a landfill site and so forth. So construction waste, this is construction waste when you're still constructing the building, but there's also waste of that is generated from the building, whereby sometimes you need to think about some strategies around the circular economy to ensure that the same things that you are generated from a building can be used for something else, and that something else can probably be used to try and maybe make bricks that can be used to construct other types of buildings or structures that can be used. So construction waste, colleagues, is very, very it's an area of focus that is not yet entrenched yet at the moment in terms of how the industry is practicing sustainable construction methods, but it is an area that you need to start thinking about as a building inspector to at least you need to be at least aware that buildings should not be generating much waste, and that same waste needs to be able to maybe be reused or recycled or whatever the case may be. So obviously this is governed by the National Environmental Management Act. So that act obviously is not only for buildings. This act runs everywhere. Every single construction project requires that there must be a waste management plan. That waste management plan informs the strategies that you need to employ to try and reduce the amount of waste that you generate when you are constructing. there's a lot of businesses obviously at the moment that are trying to come up with things like, these things are well grouped within something called circular economy. So the circular economy is when you design a building, you need to also design a building thinking about when you deconstruct the building, what's going to happen with whatever that you use in that building. So circular economy is essentially trying to ensure that whatever that you used to construct the building, when you are maybe demolishing the building, the same things that were used to construct the building can then be used to be something else instead of just, taking them and taking them into a dump. So there's a lot of businesses that we see are coming in that space whereby people are thinking about thoughtful ways of going to recycle the steel that was used, taking the same concrete maybe that was used in that building to try and create something else that can be used maybe to enhance maybe foundations of something else, or maybe flooring, or whatever the case may be. So these are things that colleagues you might need to be aware of, or that you need to at least have an understanding that or maybe further maybe read about, so that you can come up with better ways to inspect and also ensure that buildings are fit for purpose. Then moving on to section 6, we did touch on this earlier. I'll just touch specifically maybe just on a few things that from a green ratings and also certification that as a building inspector you need to verify. So I won't focus on the other standards. I'll focus maybe primarily on the Green Building Council of South Africa's standards, or the green rating that the GBCSA uses. So as an inspector, just a few things that you just need to have a look at. You have to understand the thermal envelope of a building. That means that the envelope of a building is something called the R value. So that R value obviously determines that in this particular climatic area, if you build a building in this area, and that area maybe it's too hot, maybe it's too cold, the R value is what's going to determine what's the optimal envelope of that building that you need to design, so that R value can then determine whether how much of cooling that the building can have, and also how much ventilation you might need to have, and also how much HVAC systems that you need to install within that building. So understanding the thermal envelope of a building becomes something very, very important for a building inspector, because it will inform whether you can make recommendations around what needs to be done, and what also needs to be probably removed within that. So the second one is also water use system. So in terms of the water use systems, you need to look at things like, 12 flush toilets. You also need to make sure that, maybe the taps that are used within the building, are the flow resistors that are installed. So those things then form part of your checklist to ensure that that building is maybe compliant in as far as green building is concerned. Then you can look at things like also rainwater. What does this building have a rainwater harvesting system, which is very important? What do they do with grey water? What happens with that? So you need to do a cross check around that as well. And then in as far as energy systems are concerned, I did mention that obviously you need to look at things like lighting. Is there what kind of renewable energy technology is used to power up that system? So that then means you can look at things like, is there a solar system that's installed? How is this building powered up to meet the needs of the users of that building at any point in time? Then you think about things like lighting on daylight. What happens in that building during the day? Is there a need for lighting during the day, or are there enough? Is the glazing proper in as far as making sure that building at any point has sufficient lighting. Smart meters, very, very important these days. You also need to look at those things so that you can be able to see how much usage that building or the energy performance of that building uses. And then obviously, I think Mr. Mashilo did mention that you will also be looking at things around obviously the roofing, and maybe going forward. So from a green building point of view, roofing is obviously very important in as far as maybe rooftop solar. So those kinds of things become important from a building inspector's point of view. But there are obviously some areas whereby you might not need to actually deal with as a building inspector, but you just need to have a very high level understanding that this is how a solar PV system works, and this is what I'm looking for as a building inspector. And obviously, building inspectors these days, the approval process of buildings is not as easy, because there's a lot of knowledge that you have to have about how buildings function before you decide that this building is approved. You can't approve a building plan that will show that maybe there's a rooftop solar PV that's installed that might be heavier than the actual load profile of the roof. When the roof collapses, you know what happens. Chaos will then erupt. Then moving on to the last section, colleagues, is section 7. On section 7, I'll just look at just a few things around market trends and opportunities. Colleagues, just to mention that there's a whole lot of finance that's available to try and, improve the performance of building, or at least, from a sustainability point of view in the construction sector. Financing is not difficult. It's actually the structuring and getting that finance to happen. But a lot of banks and DFIs and various investors are looking to fund anyone that can be able to try and improve, obviously, the energy performance of a particular building, or the sustainability of a particular building at any point in time. So the market is quite big. So in as far as what needs to be done, there are obviously varying types of estimates that are floating around. But loans, grants, and concessional loans that are available, the market for green building can be quite significant, primarily because most existing buildings need some form of retrofit, so that you retrofit the building so it performs a bit better than what it was before, so that it uses less energy, it uses less water. Maybe the type of materials that were used to construct it can then be optimized so that that building can have a better functioning and so forth. So from a financing point of view, the finance is there. It's just really the structuring and making sure that that finance is accessed so that the retrofitting can happen. Then from a career opportunities point of view, one of the most important things obviously is that as a building inspector, it doesn't really help just to know that this building looks fine, it can work. But if you're trying to maybe go an extra mile, you need to look at things like let's say, for example, I'll make an example with the Green Building Council. To register with the Green Building Council as an accredited professional that can be able to assess whether a building works or doesn't work, it's not an expensive, it's not a very expensive accreditation to get. It's something that I would say you must look into, try and understand what are the requirements and also what you are going to learn, and that can obviously put you in a better position to be able to do building inspection in a different area, whereby maybe in the next 2 or 3 years, all buildings that need to be inspected will have to be inspected by someone that understands the various things we're talking about. To say, you need to understand how PV systems are integrated into buildings. You need to understand materials. You need to understand the various aspects that make up a building to work out. So colleagues, these are just the few things that that you can just look into in as far as this is concerned. Obviously, building inspectors or building inspection in South Africa is not an area that has received quite a lot of attention over the years. As we can see, that there's a whole lot of disasters that are happening in South Africa at the moment, primarily because there isn't any structured framework to ensure that after a building is approved or a building plan is approved, there is constant monitoring to avoid particular problems. Just to mention something, maybe I think everyone might be aware of it. There's a building in Mthatha that actually there was a fire that occurred there, and we don't know. We don't know what's the cause, but we do know that probably it could be something that is to do with what building inspectors were supposed to have done. It could be the fact that the building was not well maintained. It could be the fact that there might have been arson, intention or no intention. There might have been various things, but it's important that when you assess a building, you are able to at least have the bigger picture and also the knowledge to be able to assess different types of or components that make up that particular building. So the buildings that collapse. In Omonde, there was a building that collapsed. I think it killed about 9 people. Obviously, the building plan was approved, but there were also shortcomings from the construction team in as far as, what was put in place, who signed off what, and so forth. But it's an area, building inspection is an area that South Africa hasn't really formalized. I know that the SACP-CMP and also the South African Council of Architects, they do have schemes of registering building inspectors, but from a knowledge point of view, there isn't any, I think, credible mechanism or articulation route that I would say is currently there at the moment. So everything that you have to do is something that you have to learn as you move along, and also obviously enhance your skills with understanding things like, green building assessment, so it's things to look at, colleagues. Obviously, there are also things like, certain municipalities are a bit more advanced around trying to make sure that, buildings are green. Well, the green building agenda is improves the momentum of that agenda, improves, like the city of Cape Town. City of Cape Town obviously even has bylaws around green buildings, so at least there's more clarity around how the whole municipality defines what a green building is, so that when you inspect a green building, you know that, oh, okay, chef, this is the bylaws. This is what the bylaws actually say around how green buildings should operate. So those are things that you might just need to do further reading and also just looking at as well. So, colleagues, I'm about to finish. This is just a bit about what we do as the Construction Management Foundation. I did say that we are a nonprofit that primarily is concerned with the advancement of the construction management profession in South Africa. One of the ways in which we do that is obviously to one of the ways which we are actually currently doing at the moment is, to assist people that are not registered with the ACCP-CMP with professional registration. So we have a whole program that runs around that. And that obviously is more about trying to make sure that the people that actually practice on sites are actually accredited, and there is maybe a code of conduct that they have signed that they have signed up to, that ensures that should something go wrong, there is someone that can hold them accountable. But obviously, you can check more of the things that we do on our website, which I will show you right at the end. And there are some resources within this presentation. I think Mr. Mashilo will probably share with everyone, so that you can at least have some basic information about some of the things that we're talking about. So you can have a look of those key resources, and also just further reading around what's happening here. Colleagues, I at the end of my presentation. Thank you very much for making your time. I think we will then move on to maybe taking a couple of questions, so that everyone is within the same picture. So thank you very much, colleagues, for making the time. So I think over to you, Mr. Mashilo.
Thank you very much, and thanks, Ronnie. I'm gonna ask you to at least give about a minute or two of your construction management foundation. I know you've just given a little bit, but just to give a bit more, so that the colleagues that are here are able to contribute. I mean, it's an MPC. It's the same as ACRE. ACRE, the Academy of Construction and Real Estate, is also an MPC. So we're all doing all of these things just to close the gap. We cannot all rely on government to provide these platforms. Your foundations, in terms of focusing on the built environment across the board, construction management in particular, and the focus on ACRE with regard to the real estate and the building inspection, hence the focus on building inspection as it's linked to real estate specifically. I think there's a big role that we play there. There's a comment in the chat by Batobile, and I'm just gonna read it out because it doesn't look like a question. If it's a question, Batobile can always be unmuted to ask that question. It says, the tilt angle to the northeasterly in the early hours, then rotate the southwesterly later when the sun has moved. And I take that as a comment as a relation to a building orientation. If it's a specific question, just raise your hand, Batobile, and I'll give you an opportunity to make your comment. And I'm going to look out if there's any other if there are not many other questions that have been raised. As you know, colleagues, you can always send your questions to either info at 1acre, one with the number one, not ONE, just the number one, acre.co.za, or directly to myself at Mashilo at Mashilo P, Mashilo P at the end for Pitjeng at 1acre.co.za. And Ronnie's email address is also available, ronnie.siphika@cmfoundation.org.za. Ronnie, just take a minute to take everybody through the work that the CM Foundation does, and then what role they can play in making sure that the movement grows and it goes forth. And then we'll wrap it up from there. Thank you.
Yes, colleagues. There are a couple of ways, colleagues. We try and close the gap, as Mr. Mashilo just mentioned. Obviously, our focus is a lot around construction management, and construction management here is broadly defined. It will also include construction project management. Our core focus is largely to try and advance, the practice and professionalization of the construction management sub-discipline within the construction sector. Obviously, the most obvious way in which we can do that is to ensure that there is at least a better articulation from a pipeline point of view from the time you are aware. A lot of people tend not to be aware of careers within construction management. This is from high school, varsity, or even in the TVET sector, going to maybe even a postgraduate. And then obviously after post-university, this is the young professionals, and also getting into the workplace where you're actually practicing construction management and also, contributing once we have also even retired. So we'll try and look at the whole pipeline to see which areas can we close the gaps within. So there are a couple of things that we have planned out for this year, is to go obviously start at the roots, try and play some inputs in trying to create a bit of better career guidance from high school and also primary schools, whereby at the very least you would never find a child that would say that I want to grow up and be a project manager, or I want to be a construction manager. You always find kids that say that no, I want to be a doctor, I want to be a teacher, I want to be this. So our role is to try and create that that conscientization from that early age, so that they are aware. So that is an area of work that we focus on primarily, to create career guides that would talk about the various career opportunities that are available for them when they are there, and also the different types of degree programs they can take in order to get to where they need to be in as far as registration, in as far as their undergraduates and or university education is concerned. Then on universities, we look at primarily student organizations. So we partner here with student organizations like the CIOB, various student associations that are within various faculties within engineering, to try and conscientize people that there are careers that are available within this particular area, so that they know what choices to make as they move within their degrees. So obviously, a whole lot of people tend to think that if I've studied to be this is where I'll end up practicing engineering. But unfortunately, sometimes it doesn't happen that way. People tend to find themselves on site where they need to manage a plant, they need to manage people, they need to manage a whole lot of things that actually make projects work. So construction managers and project managers play a very critical role in trying to actually make things happen at the end of the day. So those are the kinds of things that we tend to look at. There's obviously different types of programs that are targeted at different things that we are packaging, but obviously the most important thing is to ensure that whatever support university students need while they're at varsity, they are able to get access to that information from an early age, so that they can make better career choices once they are out of the university system. Then once obviously you've graduated from varsity, people tend to sometimes don't even know where they will work. They don't know which company does what and so forth, and whether they should be registered as candidates or what's the benefit of registering. So all that awareness, these are the gaps that sometimes happen that end up putting us in a situation whereby we have fewer people that are actually registered, primarily because most of the time it's actually the fact that they don't have enough knowledge around it. Then young professionals have different needs compared to students. So once you're a young professional, the most important thing is about obviously getting a stable job, making sure you're paid well, and ensuring that you always have things that you can learn around in order to improve, your continuous professional development. So those are also some of the areas we are packaging. Obviously, our biggest focus is construction management practice. So we try to package some CPT events around that, whereby we would structure things like workshops around construction risk management, look at things like construction health and safety, to try and close up the gap, so that at the very least, while you know that you are practicing in a particular area, but you are still enhancing your ability to make it easy for you to get registered when you need to then get registered. Then obviously there are things that we look at outside of the professional development, which is mostly around contractor training. We are actually doing some training right at the moment with the South African Institute of Black Property Practitioners. That training is primarily focused on small contractors that need to understand how to better run a construction business. A lot of people, in construction tend to just come out of nowhere. They just start a company. They think that they are running a construction business. And unfortunately, most of those businesses fail primarily because those people tend to not understand the basics or the framework that does inform how a successful construction business is ran. And you had a better chance of running a successful construction business if you do understand the fundamentals of construction management or of project management. So those are the things that we tend to look at. And that training obviously is available to those contractors that have signed up for that accelerator program, and that accelerator program is there to obviously close some gaps for them, so that they can run better projects. If you run a better project, you are most likely to run a better company. Then other things obviously are much more policy related. There's a couple of things that are currently happening in the South African construction sector at the moment. There's a construction industry master plan that the Department of Public Works is currently busy with. We are making inputs around those areas. Parliament always obviously gazettes certain types of legislation that does sometimes require inputs from industry practitioners. So we collate all that information through surveys. Those surveys that we do, we produce them as reports, and those reports will then inform what exactly is happening, and those can then be inputted into the various call for comments that the government might need at any point in time. And then research, we do support a lot of research work. It's also a very important area that we are focusing on. We do have some partnerships with VET UJ around this, and obviously those partnerships are there to ensure that the kinds of problems that are being researched are actually problems that are informed by the practical realities that professionals tend to deal with on site. So the formulation of problem statements or trying to assist certain researchers be able to articulate the right types of questions, so they can be able to solve questions that everyone has an interest in. It's no use to conducting research that no one is going to use, particularly in a discipline like construction management. So sometimes we do partner with some researchers whereby they might need various different instruments around data collection that they might need to try and inform or at least improve the quality of their studies. We also try and do our own research, research, as I did mention. So, colleagues, that's just in a nutshell. I think the other things, obviously, you're able to just visit our website and see for yourself some of the things that we do. But yeah, I think for now, that's just a few things that I'd mentioned just at the top of my head in terms of what we do and what also we are intending to do going forward.
Thank you, Ronnie, and thanks for your time, because I know that you've got a couple of things going. Just in closing, the next session that we're going to have, just follow. I've put it in the chat. I've got a feedback. I don't know where that feedback comes from. Let me just switch off this. I've put a couple of things in the chat. You can follow us on Instagram at 1 Acre. And X is still the same at 1 acre, and then you give you an update. The next update, the next session that's coming is I'm just checking it for you. It's roof inspections, roof construction and roof inspection, and it will be followed by inspection of doors, windows, and glass. Those are both in the month of April. So we do 2 sessions a month in a month. So in the month of April, we'll do roofs and we'll do doors, windows. Those are 2 separate sections. Thank you very much, and thank you for spending your time with us. Until we meet again, check out for those dates and look out for all the communications with regard to these training webinars. As I said, they will be regular. Every single month we do about 2, and then they'll run up until we reach a series of 12, if not more. And you are able to contribute. You can visit us on Instagram and on formerly Twitter, X, and then you can contribute there. Thank you, Ronnie. Thanks to the team in the background from the Academy of Construction and Real Estate. Visit our website is landpropertyinafrica.com, landpropertyinafrica.com, and you will also find there when are the dates of the upcoming sessions with regard to not only the building inspectors, but all other programs that we are running for the valuers, for real estate, as well as some of our partners, including Construction Management Foundation and every other partner in terms of their program. Thank you very much. Enjoy yourself. Have a very good evening. Until we meet again, Arrivederci. Bye-bye.